Welcome to Age Hackers, powered by Gladden Longevity with Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, where our passion is to help you live young for a lifetime. On this show, we want to help you optimize your longevity, health, and human performance with impactful and actionable information by answering three questions. How good can we be? How do we make 100 the new 30? And how do we live well beyond 120? I'm Steve Reiter, and Dr. Gladden, we just got done with Dr. Nick Bitz with the Neurohacker Collective, and we talked about some of their products and how he became a naturopathic doctor. And in the Age Hackers Plus segment, we got into some really cool stuff.
Oh yeah, completely. No, this is a really interesting guy. I'd not met him before, but hearing the story of how he got interested in alternative medicine, and then actually not in the middle of his naturopathic training, went to India for 2 years to basically really double down on Ayurvedic medicine and where that's led him. I think it's a fascinating story that's led into some amazing work that he's doing. I think the audience is really going to love this. And he got into even more detail in the Age Hackers Plus segment.
Yeah, the Age Hackers Plus segment, he'd mentioned how he kind of puts this oil based on Ayurvedic medicine before his shower. And I really was fascinated with that. And I just kind of dug in and asked him the ins and outs and how does someone figure out what oils and how to do it. And so
that was good stuff.
For listeners who are interested in Neurohacker Collective's products, the brand name is Qualia, you can go in the checkout and you can type in coupon code Gladden for 15% off of your order. So neurohacker.com, enter the coupon code Gladden for 15% off your order. And I think I've gotten some social media ads from them in the past, and I've thought about it. And with that coupon code, I think I'm actually going to jump forward and try some of this stuff out.
Well, as you listen to this, you'll figure out which products you think are going to work best for you. So that'll be fun for the audience too.
And you also mentioned that you really love the fact that they say with their products, don't take it every day. You like that cycling aspect to their products.
That's right. You're going to hear about that too. And that's unusual for a supplement company. So I think you're going to find some real pearls in this podcast. Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Age Hackers podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden. I'm here with my co-host, Steve Reiter. Steve, you've been away. You've been away for a good reason. You just had some big moments in your life.
Yeah. I was in California for a funeral, and then was in Orlando for a conference for another client, and then my son flew back from Orlando to watch my son graduate high school with high honors.
Okay, well that's rounding out most of it. All you need is throw in a marriage and and you pretty much covered all the bases. Cool. All right. Well, good. Well, welcome back. It's good to have you back on the show.
Thanks, my man.
So we're here today with Nick Bitz, Dr. Nick Bitz. And Nick, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you got interested in medicine. Dr. Bitz is a naturopathic physician, also with an interest in Ayurvedic medicine. Really two kind of very cool areas that I think are important for everyone to kind of embrace in their journey, if you will. But tell us a little bit how you patched those two together. What was the initial draw for you?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a long, convoluted course.
Okay.
I was always interested in medicine. I was very interested in conventional medicine. Mm-hmm. And really, I just liked the academic. I liked studying. I liked human biology. I liked cell biology. Mm-hmm. However, I would say that took a swing of a turn of events when I actually had my own health crisis.
Okay.
I hurt my lower back. And really, I tried going to several physicians to get a diagnosis, to get treatment, and really failed at every step. And so as a young man, I was left with no other choice but to heal myself. And so I started doing it.
How old were you? Let me just get a feel for this. How old were you when this happened? You were 12?
So I was 12.
12. Okay.
And then it was chronic. So, I mean, I had dealt with
That's
this.
awfully young.
Yeah, 12 to probably 16.
Wow.
It was just an everyday present thing. I fell out of a tree throwing snowballs at cars.
Okay. Well, That's poetic justice for you, I guess.
Isn't it though? And so when you're a little boy, you think that you're immortal and that you're going to live forever. And that
Right.
certainly is not the case. And it was
Yeah.
my first major injury.
Mm-hmm.
And so, every physician that I went to, they were unable to give me any meaningful diagnosis and any meaningful treatment. They did all the imaging. And so I basically plugged into traditional Chinese medicine. I discovered acupuncture. I discovered herbal medicine, especially
So that's a while ago. So that's pretty adventurous, quite honestly, because how old were you when you plugged into things like this? It probably wasn't 12. You probably gave this a while to see if it would work or wouldn't work. So I'm guessing maybe around 14 or 15 you started to get interested in
Yeah, I would say that by the age of 15, I was doing biweekly acupuncture sessions.
Okay.
And, I was grateful. My mom was open to it. She drove me to downtown Denver, which is quite a clip from our house. And I just plugged into this traditional school and really got immediate benefit. And it was the first time that I started seeing some benefits. I started getting better, and I started getting into botanicals and really profoundly just experiencing the benefits of herbs. And for me, that was very foreign. I come from a very...
So let me ask you this. So was this acupuncture done by, there are a lot of people trained in acupuncture. And there are a lot of people using herbs, but was this really a Chinese physician who was using sort of Chinese herbs along with acupuncture, or was it a different sort of iteration of all that?
Yeah, so it was actually the School of Traditional Chinese Medicine, based out of Denver. And I was working with a lot of students, but I was working with obviously their mentors. And so it was primarily it was acupuncture focused, but I did work weekly with somebody who had a good grasp of the botanical aspect as well.
Okay. So there are a lot of Chinese herbs out there. I'm not trained in Chinese medicine, but I have been around it enough to understand that there's some very esoteric tinctures and herbs and I don't know, things that smell bad and taste worse and things like this. So as a 15-year-old, you probably weren't being introduced to that stuff. So when you're talking about botanicals, just give us a flavor of, you're talking about something more that would be more quote unquote in the mainstream, or what are we talking about?
No, I'm talking about the herby, the smelly, very potent botanicals. I would leave the clinic with a bag full of herbs, stems, leaves, greens, things I didn't even know what was in the bag, and was told to put it into my crock pot, cook it up slowly, basically extract the water and drink the tea on a daily basis.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. Okay, cool. And so from that, what were you noticing? I'm sure there was pain that was being relieved. Acupuncture is good for relieving pain, but there was also some healing going on here too, right? It sounds like. Did you ever get a firm diagnosis of what you were actually healing, or
Never.
was it
not once? Okay. Nope. And I think it boiled down to just some kind of nerve pain. And nerve, as you may know, nerves are very hard to treat, especially a chronic nerve inflammation. So I, in essence, that's what it was. So yeah, it certainly was the pain element that I was noticing benefit. But it was just, I felt better overall. I mean, it was really treating me individually. Yeah. And so I tend to run cold as an example, and suddenly I felt more warm on a daily basis. And so I felt like it was counterbalancing some of my weaknesses just to make me more resilient, more strong in ways outside of my illness as well.
Nice. Okay. So you're 16, and it sounds like if this was running from 12 to 16, that by the time you were 16, you were in pretty good shape again, or where were you in that process?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that was just the start. From that experience, I started digging more into some Eastern philosophies, started getting into Buddhism, studying meditation, understanding the power of the mind and how the mind can be accessed and leaned on in these health crisis moments.
Right. Yeah, it's an incredible tool.
Yeah.
But what about the back itself? Was the back pretty well resolved for you by 16, or was
No,
that
it wasn't. It really wasn't until I introduced yoga. And
okay?
that's when I saw, I think, the greatest transformation overall.
Okay.
And so I was doing all of these in parallel, and then so after I
Sure.
started doing traditional Chinese medicine, I started meditating, and then I started practicing yoga. I just bought a DVD, started practicing in my parents' house. And at that point, I mean, talk about foreign. Nobody was even talking about yoga.
Right. What year was this?
Oh
This was
boy. I mean, again, I was probably 17 at this point.
okay.
And so, whenever I spoke about it, people were like, well, wait a second, yoga, isn't that for women? And I think that was the mentality. It still is in a lot of ways, but
Sure.
it certainly was at that point where people were like, oh, it's just like aerobics or gymnastics. And that's really all it is. But when you start getting to the depths of it, it's this 5,000-year-old system of medicine and healing, and incredibly powerful. And so I was starting to get into not only the physical aspects of it, but the philosophical aspects of it too. Started getting into Sanskrit. And then that, I think, was a segue for me to really do a deep dive into Ayurveda from there.
Okay. So really, you went from China to India. It sounds like
More or less. Yeah,
so you're
China opened the door.
You're living in Denver area, or you're living in Colorado, and you're basically touring the world. Cool. And then ultimately, that led to you matriculating at some university to get your own training. So what happened there?
Yeah, well, so I studied neuroscience at University of Denver. I was on the path to go get my MD. I was, that was the journey. I didn't really think that I wanted to become an acupuncturist and study traditional Chinese medicine. But ultimately, in that process, I discovered naturopathic medicine. And to me, that was a really nice middle point between conventional medicine and these Eastern philosophies. And it's very Western in its approach, but they were using a lot of the tools that these Eastern medicines and systems were using. So to me, it just naturally made a lot of sense. And I discovered Bastyr University up in Seattle, Washington. And naturopathic medicine, it has a really long, really interesting history. It definitely disappeared for a very long time, but it's starting to make an emergence once again. And so for me, it was very exciting to be a part of that. And I just love the medicine. And to me, I've seen it work. And again, I've used it all personally as myself, and it's worked really well for me over the years.
Just for the sake of the audience, go ahead and define naturopathic medicine for us. Just kind of do it in contrast to allopathic medicine or osteopathic medicine or chiropractic medicine or other things that people do, just for the audience to kind of understand that for a second.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a more natural form of medicine. It really comes from kind of the eclectic physicians in the early 1900s. I think if you ask 10 different naturopathic physicians to give you a definition, you're going to get 10 different definitions.
That's why I'm only asking you.
Yeah. The way that I look at it as it's a form of medicine that is identifying and treating the root cause, and then using natural means to move somebody from imbalance back to health. And so the tools that we use are numerous. Counseling is a huge part of it. Of course, we can do pharmaceuticals. Our list is pretty short, but we can lean on those if need be. We certainly look at botanical medicines. We look at diet. We look at homeopathy, physical medicines. The chiropractic tradition, a lot of their adjustments. Those are things that we learn as well. And so we treat the whole body, and that's I think one of our gifts. Generally, when we work with somebody, we do a vast intake. It can take 60 to 90 minutes. And it's really exploring the totality of that individual so that we understand the total picture, so we understand how we can intervene in the right ways.
Yeah, naturopathic physicians are licensed like other physicians are. Their licensures and their I'll say their scope of practice is limited in some states and more expansive in other states. So there are some states that are very naturopathic, embracing. I think Oregon, Washington, some of the northwestern states are very much that way. I know that Texas is a little more restrictive. Other states are more restrictive. So if you're listening to this, there may or may not be a naturopathic physician close to you, and some of that may have to do with where they actually have more liberty to practice their art, if you will, and where they're more restricted. So just be aware of that. So, yeah, cool. All right, so you did your naturopathic training, and then that's not exactly Ayurvedic medicine. So,
Right.
although it does incorporate some elements of that, but so how did you get into the Ayurvedic piece, which is the Indian tradition of medicine?
Well, at Bastyr, one of my mentors, one of my teachers was Robert Svoboda. He is an MD, and he has a pretty amazing story. He's a white man, and he's the first white man to graduate from an Ayurvedic college in India.
Okay.
And so his story is remarkable, almost unbelievable, but he is just a wealth of knowledge. And just hearing him talk about the medicine and the philosophy of Ayurveda and his knowledge of Sanskrit just really inspired me to take my own journey. And so in the middle of my time up at Bastyr, I took 2 years off. And I moved to India, the south part of India, which is where Ayurvedic medicine is still alive and well, and moved into an ashram, started working in an Ayurvedic hospital where they treat individuals using panchakarma and detox therapies, and really just did a deep dive, really plugged into their physicians and their teachers, and just did a deep dive into that form of medicine. So I was there for numerous months in a place called Coimbatore, as well as a place called Cochin in Kerala. And so that's really where my journey started. And I think that's where I was really grounded in the medicine. I gathered a lot of books when I was over there, and I just read. And so I just made it my journey. I'm focusing on Ayurveda. And that was pretty singular in terms of my focus at that time.
So that would have really solidified a lot of things for you when it comes to, some of your meditation practices, some of the yoga, some of the interest in medicine and healing that you have. So then you're there for 2 years. Really, it's almost like doing a residency, if you will, in Ayurvedic medicine, right?
Yeah. But
this is in the middle of your naturopathic curriculum. So then you come back to naturopathic school to finish up. Is that how that happened, or?
Yeah. So naturopathic medical schools are really two parts. There's the academic portion, which is usually 2 or 3 years of learning all the sciences.
Right.
In the same way that conventional MD students do, same exact courses.
Yeah.
And then the second half is more naturopathic focused, and it's clinic focused.
Yeah.
So I took the time off in between those two parts. And so when I came back to the States, I jumped right back into the clinic, and pretty much everything that I was doing was through the lens of Ayurveda at that moment. So I started getting into pulse diagnosis, tongue diagnosis, face diagnosis. Started working with Ayurvedic companies, supplement companies, using their products as my tools in a clinical setting.
Right.
So that became kind of my singular focus.
So I'm guessing now that actually you're a resource for your co-students, right? For your classmates, if you will, because they haven't had that 2-year exposure. So now you're introducing them to other ways of looking at things and diagnosing things. And then you probably, the guy that inspired you in the first place, if he was still there, he was still able to function as a mentor for you through all that and help you integrate the two together. I think one of the beautiful things that I've found in the healing arts is that there is no one discipline that contains everything that we need. It's really the cross-referencing and the integration of them, right? So all these different disciplines have truth and make a contribution. It's a question of being open to them and integrating them, both individually and then, corporately as you work with, providers of various things that you may not know about, right? So that's a really interesting path. So then when you graduated from school, what happened then?
Yeah. So when I graduated from Bastyr, I did 1 year of residency at Bastyr in their clinic, which is unique because naturopathic physicians are not mandated to do a residency. They're
Right.
really few and far between for us. But I was able to capture one of maybe 7 positions that's available at the Bastyr clinic.
Okay.
So I did that, and that's really I would say mostly teaching. You're working with the students. You're seeing patients, but you're seeing patients through your students.
Okay.
But that was great. It's really getting back to the roots of medicine. When you get into what is a doctor, the root word doctor is docere, which is teacher.
Yep.
And so it was nice to really hone that skill and be able to just really share my skill sets and continue to learn as well from the students.
Sure.
So I did that for 1 year. And then from there, I moved to Vail, Colorado. And I did another year of residency there at an established clinic, which was amazing. It was really focused in women's health overall, but ultimately I was learning the ins and outs of how to run a business.
Okay, got it. And then, so 2 years out of school, you've done a couple of years of residency now. And then what happens after that? You set up shop someplace, or you?
Yeah, ultimately, I was going to set up shop in Vail. I grew up skiing Vail, the mountain. It's a town that I know and love. I was in the process of starting a Panchakarma detox center based out of the Marriott, out of Beaver Creek, and was incredibly close to getting that going. But I just my life direction took a different course. I was actually speaking at a yoga conference in Beaver Creek, and there was a gentleman there in attendance who was basically doing HR for a dietary supplement company based out of Los Angeles.
Okay.
And at that time, they were looking for a formulator, and so he approached me after my talk and said, "Yeah, we'd love to fly you to LA and have you meet the team and see if that's something that you want to do." And so, never in a million years did I think I would want to move to Los Angeles. But this company, that's where they were based. They've been around since the 80s, so they had good legacy, good growth, interesting products, not necessarily the type of product that I would want to build in my own company or maybe even use in a clinical setting. But for me, it was a really nice stepping stone into the industry. And so I took the leap and moved to LA to formulate for this company.
Okay.
And so I did that, and I worked part-time in a clinic at the same time.
Are you still in LA?
Yep, still in LA.
Okay.
Yep.
So, all right. I have a daughter in LA, and we kid about the traffic. If you want to go 2 miles, it's either 20 minutes or you could walk. It's crazy there. So, but I remember I went to a conference, actually a retreat in Joshua Tree with some people, and my daughter drove me she lives right on the edge of West Hollywood and Beverly Hills. She drove me to Joshua Tree, which is out in the desert. People don't know. It's not too far from Palm Springs. It took us 6.5 hours to get over there, which is, it's like 150 miles. It was just crazy. Just the traffic's unbelievable. So I don't know. I think you could make LA work if you had a flying car, something like that, or a drone that you could sit in and fly around in. But other than that, it's pretty tough. So anyway, did you convert your skiing into surfing or do anything like that, or what's happening there?
A little bit, yeah. So since I've started a family, we definitely have dabbled in surfing. But Southern California, there's a lot to do here.
Oh, sure, it's beautiful. I love California. I'm just kind of ragging on the traffic, but
and you're right on. If it wasn't for the traffic, LA would be a much better city. Not a perfect city, but a much better city.
A much better city. Yeah, good. All right, so you're in LA, and so now you've really got a wealth of background that you're bringing forward, and you've got a curiosity. You've got an intellectual curiosity. You love cell biology. You love diving deep. None of that's been lost, I'm sure. And so now you're bringing all that integrated wisdom, so to speak, into creating things to help people. So what are you creating? Tell us about that. What are you focused on?
Well, and I've worked, in a couple different aspects of the industry. I've worked through a couple different companies, building products, that are on the shelves at Costco and Whole Foods and GNC, all over the place. But most recently, I've joined forces with a company called Neurohacker Collective.
Okay.
And we are a pretty eclectic group of individuals. There's other naturopathic physicians on board, MDs, PhDs, a lot of big minds in that space. And our focus as a company is, there's grandiose missions really to enhance well-being of humanity and to elevate cognition. And so those are the type of areas that we build products towards. So we focus on nootropic, cognitive enhancing products, and we focus on aging. And so we build.
So those are two. So those are two interesting things. I find that nootropics can be very helpful. I find that they're even more helpful when you take care of the substrate issues, if you will, right? So like neuroinflammation and some of the things related to a leaky gut and a leaky blood-brain barrier and, things like this. And then, of course, you're bringing in your diet and everything else into it as well. But it seems like the nootropics can work really well, particularly when the substrate is ready to be, impacted by them to good benefit. It sounds like with your holistic approach to everything, how is it that you're thinking about that in terms of how because in my reference point, there's no one supplement that does everything for somebody. Things have to be sort of packaged together, right? And so how are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah. There's a couple different ways that I think that we think about it. First and foremost, I always look at the energetics of especially the botanicals that are in products to make sure that we're not pushing any one element too strongly, such as putting together a bunch of heating herbs and somebody that's already too hot. It's just going to create problems for them. And so we're either trying to create neutral products, energetically speaking, or not push things too heavily in one direction. And again, that's really based in kind of the Ayurvedic viewpoint of energetic products.
Yeah, bringing things back into balance. Yeah. I think this is a good point because there are nootropics out there. There's pharmacology out there also that pushes on the gas pedal pretty hard.
Yes.
And I think you're actually, you're getting a short-term boost for a long-term loss, so to speak. Maybe a higher incidence of degenerative brain diseases on the back end and things like that, right? So there's some things out there, some of the ADHD medicines and ADD medicines and too much caffeine and, all these kinds of things. They're pushing on the gas pedal, but how do you actually bring somebody into homeostasis, right? So, So what's the approach there? Because I love the way you're thinking about this.
Yeah, I mean, we want to create products that are felt, that are tangible, that are experiential, that people take them and they're like, oh, wow, I have more focus or my mood's better today. Like that's really important, but you don't want to do that at the result of these long-term side effects. And so
that's right.
You want to make sure that you're supporting the whole system. And this is really the second approach, and probably the most important approach, is that we take a whole system approach, and we're looking at, as an example, you can look at the brain, and we're looking at the different pathways, the neurotransmitters, these different things that we can influence in a variety of ways. And then when we're formulating, we're basically taking the best of all of the ingredients that we can that are pushing multiple different pathways that are complementary, that are synergistic, to create these whole system formulas. So rather than just pushing dopamine as an example, that may be part of what we're doing, but we're doing a lot of other things around.
This episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast is brought to you by H2 Molecular Hydrogen in the Gladden Longevity Store.
Yeah, Steve, you've heard us talk about this numerous times on the podcast in terms of the benefits of H2 and hydrogen water. We love it. It's really the best way to balance your entire redox system. So it really protects you from free radical damage. I take it every time I get on a flight, protect me from radiation damage when I'm flying. and I use it to rejuvenate my brain in the afternoon. There's really two kinds of exercise. There's physical exercise, and taking H2 before or after that works great, but also there's mental exercise. And I find that the H2 will bring your brain back when you're tired in the afternoon. So I think it's like the perfect thing for longevity and for performance, quite honestly.
And I talked to you about this, that I found dropping 1 or 2 tablets in a glass of water right before bed. I've seen an overall bump in my deep sleep when I do so.
Fascinating, yeah.
Yeah, so if you click on the store tab when you visit GladdenLongevityShop.com and use the promo code PODCAST10, you'll get 10% off your order. And this code isn't only good for our H2 product, but it's also good for all the supplements we carry. So podcast10 at the GladdenLongevityShop.com.
Yeah, one of the other things that I use it for routinely is when I'm about to go on a mountain bike ride. And I will say this, that if I go on a long mountain bike ride, I will take one prior, I'll take one during, and I'll take one after. And some of the Ironmen that we've worked with have said that when they're doing an Ironman, they'll take it 3 or 4 times throughout the race. And their comment is that it's like taking out the old battery and putting in a new one. It really rejuvenates your body's ability to perform when you're doing more extended athletic activity. So think about that too. If you want to go do a longer hike or whatever else, take it with you.
So GladdenLongevityShop.com, enter podcast 10 for 10% off your order.
H2 molecular hydrogen. It's low-hanging fruit on your quest to make 100 the new 30. Okay. Yeah. So with that, let's get a little bit more specific. So you have some products on the market. Maybe pick one of the products you want to talk about and just talk us through the different components of that product and how that's, working sort of synergistically to balance the system, if you will.
We certainly can look at within the aging category. We have a product called Qualia Senolytic. And senolytics is it's kind of an amazing emerging area of science right now. It's incredibly interesting. There's a lot of buzzworthy ingredients. Fisetin, we're learning more and more about. But I look upon senolytics as, in a lot of ways, kind of the future of aging. It's still early days, but what we're seeing right now is absolutely fascinating. And so we've built a product to be a solution in this area. And
so just for the audience, I'm sure everybody's familiar with senescent cells and the role they play in aging. They're one of the hallmarks of aging. There are multiple pathways for a cell to become senescent. Yep. I won't review all these here, but we've talked about them on prior podcasts. But many things that go awry with a cell, either short telomeres or DNA damage or diminished mitochondrial function or proteins that aren't working properly, et cetera, et cetera. Almost anything can push a cell into being senescent, where it becomes kind of like this zombie cell, if you will. But then it can become secretory. And then it really starts to pollute the environment that the other cells are working in, and it recruits other cells to become senescent, or it actually promotes transformation to malignancy. Although initially, senescent cells can be formed in response to the body trying to protect itself from malignant changes that may have occurred in the DNA. So it's a very complex area, but a very important area. And one of the drivers of aging, if you will, is the accumulation of senescent cells and their secretory byproducts that then continue this downward spiral, this positive feedback loop in a negative direction of the aging process. So it's something that clearly has to be addressed if we're going to reverse aging, halt aging, etc. So senolytics now step into the picture as a way to prune senescent cells. And there is interesting data showing that if you prune too many senescent cells, that you actually accelerate their formation. So in biology, everything is an economy of balance. So trying to get this right, fisetin being actually a relatively potent senolytic, almost on the order of dasatinib and quercetin, which is a chemo drug and another botanical, if you will. It's an interesting compound. So we have experience with all those, quite honestly. So tell us a little bit more about what you're doing with it. Is it just fisetin that's in there, or what else?
No, so it's a multi-compound formula.
Okay.
It's 9 different botanical extracts, and we're really interested in combining multiple ingredients, which again gets to that the complex system approach that we take. So rather than just giving people fisetin, which can push one pathway and impact a subset of senescent cells, we're giving the body multiple ingredients in hopes that we're casting a wider net, that we're addressing different types of senescent cells in different tissues of the body. And so that's one of the aspects of this formula. And
does the company have a research arm here? Is there something with your cell biology interests? Are you guys doing things in the petri dishes or animals or human studies or anything to that?
Yeah, so we always run human studies on all of our products. And that's one of the I would say, aspects that really separates Neurohacker from a lot of the companies that are out there in the industry. And senescent cells, there's no biomarker in a lab that you can assess. You can't look at somebody's load, take products, and then check again and check their levels and see a decrease over time. We don't have that available yet. And so what we look at instead are outcome studies. And so we're looking at, and the most common outcome would be joint health. And so we're looking at that specifically, and we've used this product over the course of several months to look at the impact on joint function, which gives us a really good indicator that the product is efficacious.
So just so the audience understands, why would they be looking at a joint when we were just talking about the brain? A lot of osteoarthritis is presumed to be related to senescent cell formation in the joint space, if you will, and that's a main driver of arthritic changes, osteoarthritic changes in the joint. So that would be the reason to look at it. And it's something that's pretty easily measurable from the standpoint of either it hurts or it doesn't hurt. Your mobility is complete or it's not complete. So it becomes a pretty easy way to try to get a functional assessment of something. And how's that working out?
Yeah, the results have been amazing. We've basically done 3 cycles of this product, and we're dosing the product in the same ways that they do in clinical settings. And so they use high intensity dosing very infrequently, followed by a break. And so we use the product for 2 days, followed by that break of 4 weeks or more. And you can.
So this is the hit and run strategy is basically, I think, what it was originally termed in some of the early papers I was reading. So yeah, and we do a similar thing. This is not something you want to be doing all the time. There are other things like this too, right? Like with rapamycin, you don't want to necessarily be taking rapamycin every day.
Right.
Because you're blocking mTOR persistently. But here, this idea of senolysis, if you're going to go in and impact senescent cells, it's impact them, step back, and let the body kind of take its course. And actually, there are other things you can be doing in the interim, right? You can to decrease the formation of senescent cells, right? Like you can be re-lengthening telomeres, and you can be modulating inflammation. You can be doing other things that are actually driving cells to become senescent. So now you get senomorphics in there, where you're actually starting to change cells from being senescent back to being normally functioning. But the bombing attack, the bombing raid, if you will, is a two-day bombing raid, and then you back off for a month. So that's the strategy, just so the audience understands this, because it's really important to understand that senescent cells play an important role in the body too, right? They're very important for healing. They're very important for embryonic formation. But if you break your leg, you need senescent cells to help clear out some of the areas, and it's really an integral part of the healing process. So there's nothing bad. It's really a question of balance here. And so I applaud you for doing that, because it's easy to sell a supplement and say you should take this every day. It's much wiser to actually say, no, this is a potent product, but take it every month for a couple of days. That's really smart, especially on the side of a supplement company that's trying to sell supplements. So I applaud you guys for thinking that way. So do you have a strategy for the off days?
Well, so there's certainly things you can do. on the off days. And so the research suggests that exercise is a very potent senolytic as well. So it's important to keep exercising. It's also important to build the immune system, to make the immune system more intelligent. And there's a term called immunosenescence. And so pretty much all the cells of the body can become senescent over time. And the immune system's no different than that. So it is important that you are building a robust immune system on the off days so that the immune system can go in, survey, find these cells, and get rid of these senescent cells as well.
Yeah. When you're youthful, your natural killer cells are going in and taking out senescent cells. And so as you age and your as you age and your immune system is weaker, so to speak, then the senescent cells are also evading those natural killer cells and the rest of the immune system. So it becomes this compounding area. And I think, is there a form of exercise that you guys have found in your research to be more beneficial when it comes to this? Because, I enjoy vigorous exercise. Like I did, I don't know what, I ran maybe 3.5 miles this morning at a really good clip. I felt really great. And it was like, oh, this is terrific, right? I love feeling this sense of like effortless energy, right? Kind of flowing through you. That's just like the most wonderful thing. But I find that many people, when they exercise, I don't think they really exercise hard enough, because for me, if you can still carry on a conversation at points during your exercise routine, you probably haven't pushed it hard enough, right? Like you don't have to be, it means you can have a conversation when you're warming up, you can have a conversation when you're cooling down, but when you're actually in the thick of it, if you can carry on a conversation, I don't think you're really pushing hard enough per se. Now, that being said, there's tons of data that walking is wonderful, and we all know that you can overdo a good thing. So many injuries happen when people push too hard, and many actually damaging things can occur when you push too hard. So there really is a sweet spot. But I'm just kind of curious if you have some thoughts about that. You're a skier, you're other things. So,
yeah, and from the Ayurvedic perspective, they definitely take a less is more approach pretty much to everything. They don't want to overdo any one thing. And so, we do know that individuals...
They don't win the Olympics either very often, from what I see.
Right, fact. but we do know that people that run marathons, that are high intensity athletes, they have, I'm going to say a less robust immune response.
That's right.
So it is finding that balance. I'm a huge walker. I love practicing yoga. So I prefer to do less rather than too much, and just not overdo it. But you just got to find, really it comes down to your body type. What can you handle? What's best for you? What creates balance for you? I think fine tuning that as you age is critically important.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason I get back to it is because we know that VO2 max is such a strong predictor of, everything, if you will, dementia, cancer, heart disease, longevity itself, youthfulness in general. So measuring and maintaining a high VO2, I think is always a good target. That being said, you can certainly overdo exercise. And so I'm not advocating that, but so exercise. Yeah. Okay. Anything besides exercise in the off days between the carpet bombing?
Yeah, I mean, so calorie restriction, if it's feasible, highly recommend it. There's something called the fasting mimicking diet. That some of the big minds in the space, they theorize that it primes senescent cells for elimination from the body. You could fast. That could be another approach. There's some emerging science right now that shows that healthy blood sugar levels is critically important. So for whatever reason, when you spike glucose, it can really lead to the promotion of senescent cell development. So
insulin drives senescence, just like mTOR and IGF-1 drive senescence. They're both accelerators of senescence. So when you spike glucose, you spike insulin in response to it. You're now creating more senescent cells, particularly in the vasculature. Right, it was one of the reasons arteries get stiff as we age. So you're exactly right there. I think avoiding sugar. I also love the idea of fasting, and the 5-day fast mimicking diet is really interesting. We did an interesting podcast. You may want to even look into this with a company called Mimeo that's just coming to market now, where they have rigorously, MIMIO, where they've rigorously done studies. This guy's whole PhD was built on this. And they looked at fasting for 72 hours. And then out of 200 molecules that were going up in these fasting people, they were trying to extract, well, what are the things that are actually driving the health benefits of fasting? And they pulled out four elements, PEA, OEA, spermidine, and nicotinamide. And they basically packaged those together in robust doses, quite honestly, with an interesting thing that you can actually increase reverse cholesterol transport, and they've demonstrated that in humans. You can actually mimic fasting even though you're eating, and you can actually increase autophagy with the spermidine. You can increase DNA repair. Yep. So there's lots of really fascinating things that can happen. It's kind of an evolving field. And then there's also interesting data when it comes to fasting. People that eat one meal a day have a 30% increase in mortality, 80% increase in cardiovascular disease on a study with 24,000 people that was published not too long ago. So it's really getting this right is important. If you're going to fast, it's really important to eat properly, because when you eat one meal a day, you're way metabolically overloading your body. It's a stressful experience, right? So we're now bigger fans of eating small amounts a bit more frequently in whatever window you want to choose to eat. But I think that's a little bit saner way to go. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I think you hit a lot of the salient points. We've started looking at methionine restriction as well.
Okay, right. Which the amino acid methionine. Right?
Yep. And it's interesting. I mean, the science has been around since the 90s.
Yep.
But we really haven't seen that field emerge quite yet. But in a lot of ways, it mirrors kind of the prolon, the fasting mimicking diet in terms of its effects, which is fantastic.
Yep.
Talk a little bit more about that and how someone might look into it more and integrate that. And Dr. Gladden, how often should people look at that kind of restriction?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah. So again, it's early days.
Yeah.
With that said, if you can restrict methionine levels around 10% of what people tend to eat, and there are diet plans online that give you the breakdown of the amino acids. But we know that there are certain foods that they tend to be low methionine overall. There are nutrients too that are a mimetic in this area. So you can look at glycine, you can look at selenium. Yep. There's an L-homocysteine molecule. They bring about a lot of these low methionine states in the body. And so for whatever reason, that just shifts the physiology in a very positive manner, really? Much like fasting. So you get an increase in autophagy and all of these cell repair processes. So it's still early days, but it seems to have some implications for longevity. What we're finding right now is that the science shows that it may be continuous. Continuous diet plan may be best overall. There's one study showing that a short-term, infrequent, intermittent methionine restricted diet can be beneficial. But so we're trying to figure that out. Does it need to be for an extended amount of time, or can you do it? Can you pulse 3 days, 4 days, 5 days at a time and get these same benefits?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Methionine is in almost every protein as an amino acid. So you're really talking about a low protein diet, which is interesting because everybody's particularly, even writing books about this, how people need to be actually pounding or eating a lot of protein. And yet people that eat high protein diets have a shorter life expectancy, particularly for middle-aged people. And older age people do need more protein, or they need more protein. But they don't actually need more protein. They actually need to build more protein in the body because they have, myopenia and they have osteopenia and things like this. But it is interesting. Tell us a little bit about how does glycine, I'm not aware of how glycine, I take glycine, we use glycine, but I'm not aware how glycine lowers methionine. Is that a direct effect or?
That's a good question. I don't have that answer on my
Okay.
fingertips. I know I had my science team write up a brief on the methionine restricted diet, and
Okay.
they identify glycine as one molecule that can lower methionine significantly.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. I'm not familiar with that. I'll have to look at that as well. So, so what's next for you? Have you found your long-term home here, or what's happening? You're going to start your own company, or what? What are we
So
talking about?
right now, yeah, I'm happy at Neurohacker Collective. I love working with this team. I love the type of products that we're
Mm-hmm.
building. The senolytic product in particular has really taken strong hold. It's become one of our flagship products over the course of the last 8 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to keep developing super innovative products, especially for brain health and especially in the aging space.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about the senolytic. Do you want to just talk a little bit about the brain products that you have for people in terms of, I know you have the nootropics, but it sounds like you're taking a more comprehensive approach to the brain too. Maybe you could talk people through that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, our flagship product's a product called Qualia Mind.
Mm-hmm.
Incredibly robust formulation. Again, takes that complex system science approach to brain health. It's a 7 pill per day product,
Mm-hmm.
but it's again not intended to push the pathways too heavily. It's just giving you broad support for brain health. And so that's the flagship from which really all of our nootropic and brain health products come from.
Mm-hmm.
We have developed a product called Focus that's really meant to be more streamlined, a little bit more focused in its effect overall. It's a 2 pill per day product, really geared towards retail people that want a little bit more simplified products. Taking
Mm-hmm.
7 pills per day isn't always feasible for everybody.
It's not what everybody wants to do. Yeah.
Right. But we've taken some of the core elements of Qualia Mind and put them into that 2 pill format, which has been really
Mm-hmm.
great. And then we're certainly looking at expanding that whole category. We're looking at how can we get in there and detox the brain? Can you do that in a meaningful way to reset receptor sites, to help just get rid of the metabolic byproducts, and things that you can do on the off day. Again, on
Mm-hmm.
Qualia Mind, we don't recommend taking it every day. We recommend taking it up to 5 times per week, and taking a break. And so we want to
Mm-hmm.
create products too that are gentle and supportive on the off days. And so we're looking
Mm-hmm.
at that presently. Of course, Qualia Senolytic impacts all of the senescent cells in the body. One area that it touches is the brain. We know that neurons don't regenerate. You have one neuron, but the supporting cells all go towards senescence. And so it's important that we're taking care of those cells as well, and they don't become problematic over time. And so,
Mm-hmm.
in part, the senolytic formula is geared in that direction for brain health as well.
Nice. Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Really interesting to hear your journey. Interesting to hear the breadth of experience that you bring to this, and the thoughtful way in which you're going about it. I think that's a little unusual sometimes in this space, where people are about let's just sell more stuff. We've run into that. We've run into some great products that are prescribed every day, and we know they're great products, but they shouldn't be taken every day, right? So again, I applaud you for actually taking this approach. It's kind of a wise one. So we're going to close this portion of the show, and then we'll have you stay on for maybe an extra 10 minutes if you can. We'll ask you a few extra questions for our subscriber audience, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yep.